The planet Krios was once a jewel of the galaxy. It was a world of blue forests, glowing oceans, and cities made of white glass. The Kryosians were not warriors. They were a gentle people who spent their lives studying art, music, and the stars. For thousands of years, they believed the galaxy was a safe place because they belonged to the Galactic Council, a group of powerful alien races that promised to protect everyone. But today, the white glass cities were burning. High Counselor Alara stood in the dark command center of the capital city. Outside the reinforced windows, the sky was no longer blue. It was a sickly purple, filled with the smoke of 1,000 fires. The Xylos Swarm had arrived 3 days ago. The swarm did not talk. They did not negotiate. They were like a tide of insects, millions of them, flying in jagged ships that looked like shards of black rock. The Kryosian planetary shield had flickered and died an hour ago. Now, the enemy was landing. "Status report," Alara said. Her voice was trembling, but she tried to stay strong for her staff. A young officer looked up from a computer screen. His face was pale. "Counselor, the southern sectors are gone. The swarm is consuming everything: the plants, the buildings, the people. We have sent 15 distress signals to the Galactic Council. We are using every frequency." And Lara asked, her heart pounding. The officer looked down at his shaking hands. They haven't replied, ma'am. The high-speed relay shows they are receiving our messages. They are watching us die." But the line remained silent. Alara looked back at the window. A massive explosion rocked the building. In the distance, a beautiful library that had stood for 10,000 years collapsed into dust. The Kryosians were a level 2 civilization. They had small ships for trade, but no real weapons. They had spent their wealth on hospitals and schools, trusting the Council to be their sword. "Send it again," Alara commanded. "Tell them there are children in the bunkers. Tell them we are an ancient culture. We cannot be replaced." Minutes felt like hours. The command center grew colder as the power grid began to fail. Finally, a light flickered on the main screen. A response. The officer cried out. The room went silent. A holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It was a representative of the Galactic Council, a tall lizard-like alien with cold golden eyes. He was sitting in a comfortable chair, thousands of light years away in a safe golden palace. "Counselor Ilada," the lizard alien said, his voice smooth and empty of emotion. "We have analyzed your situation. The Xylos Swarm is too large. To send a fleet to Krios would cost the Council 40% of its military budget. Mathematically, your planet's economic output does not justify the risk of a war." Alara gasped. "You are talking about money. My people are being eaten alive." "We prefer the term resource management," the alien replied. "Krios is now a red zone. We have officially removed you from our maps. We suggest you spend your final hours in prayer. Goodbye, Counselor." The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavier than the explosions outside. The betrayal was complete. The people they had trusted, the leaders they had paid taxes to, had simply erased them. "They left us for dead," the officer whispered. "The whole galaxy is watching, and no one is coming." Ilara walked to the radar screen. The red dots, the enemy, were everywhere. The blue dots, the defenders, were almost gone. She thought about the millions of people hiding in the underground tunnels, holding their breath, waiting for a rescue that was never coming. She felt a deep, cold anger. If they were to die, she wanted the galaxy to know exactly what they had done. She walked to the old dusty radio in the corner of the room. This wasn't a council radio. It was an ancient, long-range emergency system that used old-fashioned radio waves. It was slow, and it was loud. "Switch to the emergency void frequency," she ordered. "But ma'am," the officer said, "that frequency goes into the forbidden sector. No one lives there except the Deathworlders. The humans, they are barbarians. They haven't spoken to the galaxy in a century. The civilized galaxy just told us to die," Alara snapped. "Maybe the barbarians will have a different answer." She grabbed the microphone. "This is Krios. We are being murdered. The Council has abandoned us. We have no weapons. We have no hope. If anyone can hear this, please help us." She broadcasted the message. She didn't use codes. She didn't use fancy language. Just a simple cry for help into the dark, empty void of space. For 10 minutes there was only static. The sound of white noise filled the room. Outside, the sound of the swarm's wings grew louder. They were at the doors of the command center. The metal was starting to bend. Screams echoed from the hallways below. "Turn it off," Alara said, closing her eyes. It was a mistake. But then, the static changed. A new sound began to vibrate through the floor. It wasn't the sound of an explosion. It was a deep, rhythmic, thrumming thump, thump. It sounded like a giant heart beating in the sky. Suddenly, the old radio burst into life. There was a lot of noise, the sound of fire and heavy machinery. Then, a human voice broke through. It was deep, rough, and sounded like it was used to shouting over the wind of a storm. "Krios, this is the Terran heavy cruiser Indomitable. We caught your signal. We were busy hunting something else, but we don't like bullies." The voice paused, and the sound of a massive engine roaring could be heard in the background. "Hold on to your seats, Krios. The humans are coming, and we brought the big guns." Alara looked up at the ceiling. The sky didn't just change color, it seemed to rip apart. High above the smoke, 5 massive black shapes emerged from the void. They weren't elegant. They were covered in scars and thick armor. They looked like they had been built in a volcano. The silence of the grave was over. The roar of the Deathworlders had begun. The sky above Krios did not just open, it screamed. When the 5 human warships emerged from the void, they didn't glide like the graceful ships of the Galactic Council. They slammed into reality with the force of a falling mountain. These were the Terran ironclads, massive blocky ships made of thick recycled steel. They were painted a matte black that seemed to swallow the light of the fires below. In the command center, Ilara and her officers watched the radar in disbelief. The Xylos Swarm, which had thousands of small, agile fighters, swarmed toward the 5 newcomers like a cloud of angry hornets. To the Xylos, these 5 ships looked like slow, easy prey. They are surrounded. The young officer cried out, "The swarm is going to eat them alive." But the human voice came back over the radio.com and almost bored. "This is Captain Miller of the Indomitable. To the people of Krios, close your eyes and cover your ears. Things are about to get very loud." Suddenly, the sides of the human ships opened. Thousands of small hatches slid back, revealing rows of heavy cannons. Humans did not use the elegant plasma beams or light-based weapons that the rest of the galaxy used. Those weapons were too clean for a Deathworlder. Instead, the Terrans used kinetic killers, giant slugs of solid tungsten pushed by massive explosions of gunpowder and magnets. Boom, boom, boom. The sound was so loud it shattered the remaining glass in the command center. Each time a human ship fired, a massive flash of fire lit up the dark sky. The tungsten slugs traveled at a fraction of the speed of light. When they hit the Xylos ships, there was no burning, there was only total destruction. A single human shell would go straight through 5 enemy ships, turning them into clouds of metal dust before continuing on into space. The invincible swarm began to panic. They had never seen weapons like this. They tried to use their energy shields, but human metal doesn't care about shields. It simply smashes through them. "All ships, full thrust." Captain Miller's voice commanded, ramming speed for the smaller ones. "Don't waste the big shells on the trash." Then, the true horror and glory of humanity was revealed. The massive Terran engines, glowing with a fierce orange light, roared to life. The ships moved forward like giant battering rams. They didn't even fire at the smaller Xylos fighters anymore. They simply ran them over. The heavy armor of the human ships was so thick that the enemy's small lasers bounced off like pebbles hitting a tank. They are monsters," whispered the officer, his eyes wide with hope. "No," Ilara replied, her voice filled with a new strength. "They are shields. They are the only ones who didn't calculate the cost of our lives." As the battle in the sky turned into a slaughter for the swarm, the human ships moved directly over the capital city. They hung there like giant dark clouds, blocking out the purple smoke. "Ground teams drop," Miller shouted. The bottom of the ships opened, and hundreds of small drop pods fell like shooting stars. They hit the ground with such force that the earth shook. From the pods stepped the Terran Marines. These weren't diplomats. They were men and women encased in power armor, massive suits of metal that made them look like robots. On the ground, the Xylos soldiers, who looked like giant, terrifying spiders, rushed toward the humans. The Xylos were fast and had sharp blades for arms. Usually, one Xylos could kill 10 aliens, but the humans didn't run. They stood in a line. They carried chain guns, weapons that fired thousands of metal bullets per minute. The sound was like a continuous roar of a beast. The Xylos soldiers didn't even get close. They were ripped apart, their black ichor staining the white streets of Krios. One human marine, his armor covered in the dust of the battle, looked up at a hidden camera in the street. He didn't say a poetic speech. He just reloaded his massive weapon and muttered, "Is that all you bugs got?" In the command center, the mood had changed from a funeral to a miracle. The screens that were once covered in red dots, the enemy, were now turning green as the humans cleared sector after sector. The humans didn't ask for permission. They didn't ask for maps. They simply tracked the sound of screaming and went there to stop it. However, the victory wasn't complete yet. A massive shadow began to cover the city. From behind the planet's moon, the Xylos hive ship appeared. It was the size of a city, a living nightmare of teeth and black metal. It was the ship that had destroyed the Galactic Council's outposts. The hive ship began to charge its main weapon, a beam of dark energy that could crack a planet's crust. It aimed directly at the human ships in the city below. The radio crackled. It was Captain Miller again, but this time he sounded angry. "Hey Bug King, you think you're the biggest thing in the void? You haven't met a human with a grudge." The Indomitable began to move. It didn't turn away to hide. It turned its nose directly toward the massive hive ship. The engines roared so hard that the heat began to melt the snow on the distant mountains. "All power to the frontal prow," Miller ordered. "We're going to show them why our planet is called a death." Ilara watched, breathless. The tiny human ship, tiny compared to the hive ship, was charging forward like a brave knight against a dragon. The Xylos hive ship fired its dark beam, hitting the human ship's front. The metal turned red, then white from the heat. The shield screamed, but the human ship didn't stop. The roar of the engines became a deafening scream that shook every building on Krios. The Indomitable was a bullet, and the hive ship was the target. The collision was not silent. When the human cruiser Indomitable slammed into the Xylos hive ship, it was like a hammer hitting an egg. The human ship didn't explode. It was built for this. Its nose was a solid block of reinforced armor designed to survive the gravity of black holes. It pierced the living skin of the hive ship, burying itself deep inside the enemy's heart. Inside the hive ship, the hive mind screamed across the planet. The smaller Xylos bugs froze, clutching their heads in pain. Then the Indomitable detonated its internal thermal charges. From the outside, the massive alien city ship began to glow from the inside out. Beams of white-hot light leaked through its cracks before the entire vessel turned into a second sun in the sky. The shockwave cleared the purple smoke from the atmosphere. For the first time in days, the people of Krios saw the stars again. Down in the command center, the silence was broken by a sudden, sharp beep. The main communication screen flickered to life. It was the Galactic Council again. The lizard-like alien was back, but his cold golden eyes were now wide with panic. He was looking at the sensor data of the destroyed hive ship. "Counselor Elara!" the alien shouted, his voice high. "Our sensors show a massive energy signature. Did the Xylos weapon malfunction? We have decided that the situation has changed. A council battle group is entering your system now too, to liberate the survivors and secure the human technology. Tell the humans to stand down and hand over their ships for inspection." Elara looked at the screen with pure disgust. Now that the danger was gone, the vultures were coming to claim the prize. They wanted the human ships. They wanted to study the metal that had done the impossible. But before she could speak, a new window opened on the screen. It was Captain Miller. He was standing on the bridge of his ship. His face was covered in soot and blood, and his uniform was torn. He looked like he had just walked through hell, and he looked like he was ready to go back. "I'm sorry," Miller said, his voice like grinding stones. "I think there's a glitch in my translation software. Did I just hear a coward talking about inspections?" The council representative straightened his robes. "Captain Miller, you are a member of a minor species. We are the Galactic Council. We represent the law of this sector. You have used unauthorized kinetic weapons. We are coming to take control of Krios and your fleet." Captain Miller leaned into the camera. He didn't look scared. He looked hungry. "Listen closely, lizard man," Miller growled. "My engines are still hot, my crew is still angry, and my magazines are still half full of tungsten slugs. We didn't see any law here when the children were screaming. We didn't see any battle group when the hive ship was charging its cannon. We saw a void, and we filled it." Miller looked at Elara and gave a small, respectful nod. Then he looked back at the council. "Krios is no longer a council world. It is a ward of the Terran Union. If your ships cross the orbital line, we won't send a message. We won't file a report. We will simply treat you like the bugs we just stepped on. Do you want to find out why our ancestors called Earth a death world? Come and find out." The council representative turned pale. Behind him, other council members were whispering in fear. They had spent thousands of years being civilized, forgetting that some things in the universe only understand strength. They saw the black, scarred hull of the Indomitable, a ship that had literally rammed a city, and they realized they had no weapon that could stop a species that used their own ships as bullets. We will protest this," the alien stammered. "Protest all you want," Miller said, "but do it from your own sector. Get out of our sky." Miller cut the feed. The screen went black. The recovery began quickly. The humans didn't wait for a thank you. Massive cargo ships descended from the void, but they weren't carrying guns. They were carrying standard Terran survival kits. Within hours, human engineers were rebuilding the Cryosian power grid. Human doctors were in the bunkers, using their advanced medicine to heal the wounded. Elara walked out of the command center and stood in the middle of the street. A human marine was sitting on a pile of rubble, eating a ration bar. He had taken his helmet off. He looked surprisingly young, with tired eyes and messy hair. "Why did you come?" Elara asked him. "The council said we weren't worth the cost. Why did you risk everything for a people you don't even know?" The marine looked at her, then looked at the smoking remains of the library across the street. He shrugged. "On Earth, we have an old saying," the marine said in simple English. "The only thing necessary for evil to win is for good men to do nothing. We've been nothing for a long time, hiding in the void. We decided it was time to be men again." He stood up, offered her a piece of his chocolate ration, and walked back toward his patrol. Elara looked up. The 5 human ships were still there, glowing like orange embers in the night sky. They weren't just warships, they were a promise. The galaxy had left Krios for dead, but the humans had brought them back to life. The story of the silent SOS spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other oppressed planets began to look toward the forbidden void with hope. They realized that they didn't need a council of lizards and politicians. They needed the monsters from Earth. The era of the council was ending. The era of the Terran engine had begun. And the roar of those engines was the sweetest music the galaxy had ever heard.